Today on Inspirational People, Inspirational Stories, I have the legendary Fatima Whitbread. Fatima is a two times Olympic medalist and world champion javelin thrower, and now the founder of the Fatima's Campaign, a foundation to help children in care. Fatima's journey from being a sporting superstar to dedicating her life to empowering vulnerable children is nothing short of inspiration. She's hosting a special fundraising dinner in the House of Commons on the 30th of October, bringing together leaders from sport, entertainment, politics, and business to support her mission in looking after these children. I first met Fatima on an online mastermind, and once I heard her story, I knew I had to have her on the show. She really is a true inspiration and a pleasure to have her on the show. Fatima, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, Doug. I really am appreciative of you allowing me to share your platform, and particularly in view of the fact that we have common friends, and it's nice to be able to work amongst that family. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. I remember I was actually I'm a big fan because I was the southeast of England 100-meter under 13 champion. So I was very much into sport,
Mhm.
very much into athletics,
Mm.
and you were one of the superstars who I always remember when I was younger. Although we're
Well,
pretty similar in age, so it wasn't that much.
I'm not
Um,
giving my age away here, Doug, are we?
no, well, I think we're similar in age, but I remember, absolutely incredible what
The
you did.
golden 80s, weren't they? Really, I mean, sport was the golden years in the 80s, I think you'll find. Right across the board, there were some terrific sportsmen and women. We had obviously Nigel Mansell and James Hunt in motor racing, Nick Faldo and Ian Woosnam in golf. We had obviously Botham and Graham Gooch, and many more in cricket. Even in darts, we had Eric Bristow and Jockey Wilson, Steve Davis, Jimmy White, and of course in athletics, Ovett, Coe, Daley Thompson, Whitbread, Sanderson, and many more. So yeah, I was just absolutely privileged to be able to say, I competed in a time when against giants and with giants of our time, and still their names will live on, and yeah, very proud to say that I had a thoroughly enjoyable career with my athletics. And now it's changed, obviously I've been working with Fatima's UK campaign.
Yeah, I know. And that really inspired me because I do a lot of work in terms of mental health and particularly work with a lot of children. And, it's a big passion of mine to try and help children. As a dad, I know you're a mum, as a dad, but also as someone who really cares about other people's children as well. So
Mhm.
I'd love you to tell the audience, because you told me and I was inspired about your story about what you went through as a child and then what led you to become a super duper athlete. And also, I did wonder, because you did have a bit of a tough time as a kid. I wondered whether
Mhm.
you chose javelin throwing to imagine the people you didn't like throwing spears at them, and that was why you were so good at it. But tell us about the story so people can understand where you came from and where you are now.
Well, Doug, I'll start at who is Fatima Whitbread? And I guess I'm still trying to work that one out, but I would say for now, let's just say a survivor. So abandoned as a baby, and some would say left to die. A neighbour heard a baby crying in a flat. Hadn't seen anybody coming or going in a couple of days, so she called the police, who came, banged the door down, rescued the baby, which was myself. And then I spent the next 7 months recovering in hospital from malnutrition and nappy rash. Pleased to say I got over the nappy rash. But during that 7 months, I was made a warder court by Hackney Borough Council, which saw me in the care system for the next 14 years of my life. Now, the first children's home I ended up with was in Hertfordshire in Ware, in Hoddesdon, a place called Hoddesdon, and there's 25 other children. And this was back in the 60s. So 0 to 5, I was in this children's home, and I can always remember nobody ever sat us down to discuss why we were there, what had happened. There were no particular visits from mums or dads, if for me, or Christmas cards or birthday cards to indicate anybody was out there. And I can always remember playing in the front room, and anybody that came into the car park, because it faced the car park, I'd always say, "Is that my mummy coming to collect me?" because
Oh.
this was very true of all children. You know, we were constantly on high alert.
Mm.
It's very difficult as a child to express your emotions, or actually, when you're stuck in your own head, it's difficult to work out and join the dots as to why you are there when nobody's telling you. So abandonment and neglect was very high on the list of emotional uh, feelings of depravity. And I think that I can remember the house matron one evening calling to me saying, Fatima, tomorrow morning you must be downstairs at 9 o'clock. Your mother's coming to collect you with your childcare officer to take you to a new children's home where you'll be moved to live with your half brother and sister. And I kind of had a huge, like, what on earth, is all this about? And that was a lot for a 5-year-old to process. I didn't sleep particularly well, and I kept asking myself the question as why am I moving from the only home that I've ever known and all the children that are my family? And of
Mm.
course, eager to know who this person was that said she was my mother. And so 9 o'clock, I was sat by the front door and I could see the front door opaque glass. There's this pink Cerisi movement, and the doorbell rang, and the matron answered the door, and the big burly lady came in with black curly hair, and in came a whiff of perfume. And I remember thinking, she's got a gold tooth here at the front when she was talking to the matron as well. But not once did she engage with me. She didn't look my way. And standing behind her was this slim, linear, mousy coloured hair lady with a duffel coat on. She came into the children's home larger than life, engaging and full of laughter. And I thought, oh, that must be my mummy. But how wrong was I? I mean, children naturally gravitate to warmth and security.
Mm.
And this wasn't the case. I remember traveling down to Ockendon, which took a couple of hours because there was no M25 back in that day. And when we reached Ockendon, the house auntie came out and she said, oh, Fatima, run into the back garden where all the other children are. She said, well, I sort out your mother and the social worker. And of course, as I ventured into the back garden, I saw, a sea of multicultural faces. And then you have to sort of imagine this 4-year-old and a 5-year-old talking. The 4-year-old's tugging at the 5-year-old's clothing, looking up, saying, oh, you must be my half sister. And the little 5-year-old's looking and saying, oh, yes, I must be your half sister. So she pulled me across to the climbing frame, of which I then started to climb up the steps. And I felt this thud come across my chest, and someone yanked me toward them. And it was a biological mum. And she was wagging her finger, saying, you look after your sister. I cut your throat. And she was sort of mimicking with her hand across her throat. And those were the first words that my biological mother spoke to me.
Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, my first 14 years, like most children in care, was blighted with physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. And yet, children are our future, and many of these vulnerable kids are left unprotected. And
Yeah.
there's somewhat 110,000 children in the care system as we speak, and we're facing a shortage of 11,000 foster carers. And a third of all local authorities, as we speak, Doug, are seeing a weekly increase of children coming into the care system, 1 in 3 to be precise. So we've really got to try and do as much as we can to support and help these young people because, as I said, they're our future. At 18, the corporate parent, which is the government, push out the young care leavers into the world, unprepared, unskilled, alone. And you ask yourself, I mean, would you do that to your own 18-year-old? The answer is no, isn't it? Yet
Yeah.
they're pushed out into the world without any safety net, no savings, no bank of mum and dad, nothing, no skills. And yet they're supposed to be able to circumnavigate through rent, bills, employment. And no, it's no wonder that they fall into crisis and end up homeless within the first 2 years.
Mm.
And, navigating through with a lack of financial investment is really hard one for Fatima's UK campaign to sit back and watch as well. So it's very much our priority that we want to bring, financial awareness to help skill these young people up so they won't fall into that crisis. We founded Fatima's UK campaign to sort of bring together collaboration and partnership of the care system. In fact, we want to eradicate silos and join the dots so that they can share good practice and knowledge and also, bring fundamental change to these young people's lives. But not just that, but it's also to amplify these children's voices as well. So where decisions are being made by ministers, local councillors and the corporate parent, their voices are heard because it's really important that they're seen, heard and valued.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And
we,
and Fatima, I'm assuming back in those days as well, mental health wasn't talked about in the same way it is now, and
no,
there wasn't the same support that you'd probably didn't have any support, did you?
well, children's care system back then in the 60s, a child of the 60s were very rarely emotionally needs were met.
Mm.
There wasn't a care system. Um, Social workers maybe, but it was very difficult to sit face to face with a social worker. I remember Nick Cousins was my social worker, and he was a lovely, good-looking guy like Robert Redford. But as a four-year old, what do you say when you're sat in a front room, which is a room which you rarely are allowed to go into in a children's home, and you're sat opposite a stranger, a man of the opposite sex, and it's very difficult to impart
Mm.
what it is that you're feeling or express your emotions because hardly it's very difficult to process what's going on in your own mind, let alone express it. And for a lot of these young people, by the time they're 14, 27% of them have mental health issues today because they don't have what they called unconditional love. So they have abandonment, neglect issues. And as I said, a lot of them, like myself, have suffered by, sexual, physical, and emotional abuse. So
Yeah.
trauma is really high on the agenda as well. One of the things that Fatima's UK campaign is trying to do. We're building on the success of the summit that we had in April. We had a 2-day summit of which we had 110 contributors, 900 stakeholders that over the 2 days that represented, come from education, homelessness, housing, probation, county lines, the power of arts, technology and sport programs that we do. And it only goes to show, Doug, that when you bring that collaboration and partnership together
Hmm.
and people work together, how quickly you can bring change.
Yeah, yeah.
So building on that foundation, we're now creating action hubs, wrap around local authority hubs with pathfinders in order to help to shine a light on the care system, and it will transform the care system in a way that and beyond that will help our young people to live what we call a holistic life of independence. So they're able to sustain that independence when they're out in the world on their own at that young age without this parental support,
Mhm.
and so financial awareness is definitely one of those areas where we want to be able to teach them how to look after their funds, how to budget, how to stay out of crisis, plus mental health therapy, which we have also apprenticeships um, with construction companies, skilling them up for certificates, hospitality, and indeed many more other areas. And this is not a project. It's actually a reputable, scalable model that even when local, like governments, structures evolve, it can be adopted. And therefore, we currently at the moment in discussions, and we've already got Brentwood Council signed up, Hackney Borough Council, and many others are showing interest. So it's a wonderful opportunity, which only goes to show, Doug, that when you network, expertise, and innovation, how well you can transform not just the children's lives, but communities too, because ultimately, at the end of the day, they're our future. And how you invest your time in the way you shape and nurture them will decide what society ends up. So why wouldn't you try and be bold and aspirational for them as you would your own children and put them on an unstoppable human path to reaching their goals and living their dreams? So
I love.
basically, ultimately that, when it comes to them living that independent life and having a family of their own, they can break that cycle.
Yeah. What I love about you as well, Fatima, is that you've taken the learnings of a tragedy and turning it into a triumph, or turning your mess, as we call it, into a message to help other
Yes.
people in some way or form, which is beautiful. And, I want to come back to the actual event and also the campaign of what you're doing. But going back to when you were a child, you obviously at some stage suddenly made this move into this inspirational athlete of
Sport.
of sport. What drove you? Because to have the mindset of going through that, like you say, with no love, no direction, no one to hold you and hug you the way you deserved, but still to come round and become one of the top athletes in the world for a prolonged period of time. How did you do that? What drove you towards that? What mindset was behind that? Because that's just inspiring for so many younger children that might be in the same spot.
There's a couple of things I will share with you because it was instrumental and fate had it that, and the idea really in remembering in life is that always keep your eyes peeled and your ears open or your eyes open and your ears also, because ultimately opportunities have come your way every day, but because we're not open to them, we don't learn from them. I
Mm.
mean, and basically, I mean, as I can always remember, in the children's home, the second children's home I was in, we had an auntie called Auntie Ray. And she was an East End lady, and I can remember Auntie Ray. Um, she just got us kids. We all felt secure and safe with her. She was on our level. And I always used to run up the top of the staircase and look out the port window, and I was only 10 at the time. And I would think, where's Auntie Ray live? And I thought, look out the window. Oh, I can hear her clip clopping up and down the road. Oh, she lives down there on that end corner house. And I remember running out and picking all these daffodils around the home and into people's gardens, naughty girl. And I
Hmm.
walked down to Auntie Ray's house and I hid the flowers behind my back and knocked on the door. And when she opened the door, I presented her with the flowers and I said, will you be my mummy?
Oh.
And Auntie Ray taught me really two really important lessons out of this, Doug, which um, one was she said, look, Fats, come round the back, let's talk about this. She said, I can't just be your mummy, she said, because I've got to be mum to all those other children. She said, but here's the thing, I'm not always there and you are. She said, so why don't you be their mummy when I'm not there? And I kind of started looking and thinking about this. And then, of course, I started to call out all the injusts, which were many. And I used to play with the kids, be their protector. It gave me a sense of purpose. I'd
Mm.
play in the bedroom, pillow fights. I'd help them change their bed when they wet the bed. If they were having nightmares at night, which they often did, calling for mummy, I would read them a story. And we had a baby in the room as well, which kept us awake quite a lot. So I do take the baby to bed with me, and it was like being a little mum. But what that did is in giving, you receive.
Mm.
And the
So true.
second thing it did for me, Doug, was swiveled the lens. So instead of looking inward and feeling a victim of my own circumstance, I didn't grow up being that. I was trying to help others, the
Mm.
children in the home, which, taught me an invaluable lesson that, you don't have to, there are so many of us all in the same boat. But in helping others, you're also helping yourself, right?
Yeah.
So that taught me a really good lesson. When I used to go to school, I found it difficult, like most children, to study because academically I was not emotionally balanced at times because I was constantly being push pulled and all over the place, emotionally with the ups and downs of everyday life in the children's home with all the children's emotional turmoil. It didn't matter how long you were in the care home for, you were always going to have that because children are coming and going all the time and they're emotionally disturbed.
Mm.
So I struggled at school, and I remember the head mistress. She was a spinster, a Welsh lady, and she said to me, she said, "Oh, she said, you're at the bottom of the class for math and English," she said, and she had a sort of bit of a go at me about this. And I said to her, "Well, I bet I can get up to the top class." And she said, "I doubt that very much, young lady." Well, anyway, this set me on a little track to being quite competitive for challenges. And I wanted to show her that I could be good at something. And of course, I worked my way up from the bottom class to the top class. And then she dropped me. And I said, "Well, why have you dropped me into the second class?" She said, "Well, she said, I'm doing that so you don't have to work so hard and be stressed out all the time." She said, "And you'll still get the same achievements." And I laughed for myself, but I was pleased that I actually took up the bit and, continued to work hard at my studies. But where I found myself really excelling was sport. Sport was my savior. It earned my respect from my peers and also the teachers, and I was pretty good at sport. So I was determined. I was, feisty, and I had boundless energy. Because when I was out on a sports field, it was roll your sleeves up and forget about all your worries and sense of free flow state of mind.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, I've always maintained through my campaign, the Fatima's UK campaign, the power of sports, arts, and technology for our young people, because not all children like sports, some like arts and drama and technology, and you've got to give them the opportunities to thrive as well. But what it's taught me, Doug, was a lot of life skills, which it does for young people, which they can be transferable. And it taught me how self-discipline, time management, how to deal with people, organizing the events, the practices. And it was an amazing opportunity for me to come into my own and come of age. And It was through sport, actually, I found the love of the Whitbreads. And I can remember quite clearly, uh, this last netball match that we had was a league match. And I said to Auntie Ray, because Auntie Ray was always the mum I wanted, I said, "Auntie," I said, "if we win," I said, "we're going to get a medal. And it's the first time I'll ever have a medal." I said, "And I'd want to give it to you, Auntie." You know,
Oh.
so Auntie said to me, "Oh, Fats." And this stayed with me much later into my life when I became an Olympic athlete as well. She said, "Fats," she said, "you haven't won that medal yet." She said, "So let me tell you, you just concentrate on doing what you're doing, enjoy what you do, and what will be, will be." And I remember in the Olympic Stadium when I was competing, it taught me never to put a medal around my neck before I'd won it, because there's always two games that are going on in the arena, the event itself and this psychological event. And that was so important because, if you performed well, which I did in the first inaugural World Championships in '82 at Helsinki, I remember throwing the longest throw, which led the whole of the championships, and the world record holder was Tina Lilac, and this was staged in Finland. And if you can imagine this, that it was their main sport as well. Javelin throwing is their primary sport, and she was the world record holder at the time, and she looked like being beaten by the British girl who nearly went out the day before in the qualifying rounds, may I add. But interestingly enough, I led from start to finish, but on the very, very last row, Tina Lilac, you could hear a pin drop in the stadium. Everybody was on their feet as she ran up the runway and launched a massive throw and just landed it over the 70-meter line. The stadium erupted, and Tina Lilac flew round the stadium, on a lap of honor. For me, it was like, wow, what an atmosphere to be involved with. But yeah, I mean, silver medal wasn't bad at my first world championship. So yeah.
That's pretty good. But how did you, I mean, like, there you are with no kind of foundation of support other than this lovely auntie by the sounds of things.
Yes, Auntie
How
Ray.
did you get to that? Like, okay, you're playing sport in school, great. But how
Yeah.
did you, in your mindset, I know competition, but what did you do that differentiated you from the average athlete becoming an Olympian?
Because I was a steely, inner strength young girl that had to survive the care system and fighting for my children, my fellow children in the home. I don't think all children can be the same, obviously, and same as you grow up into adulthood. You know, we're all different, and I respect that. And a lot of my friends in children's homes didn't make it, sadly. They took their own lives. But for me, at that moment in time, it was swim or sink. And I just knew I had to swim, and I knew I could be of help and try and save as many young children as I could. I'll protect as many as I could as well from being bullied, because it was in a period of time where, you know, even when we walked to school in a big queue with the auntie, you know, the kids would mercifully take the mickey out of us, you know, and we could see them going into school, coming out of school, running to their parents, happy and wanting to have cuddles and getting, you know, sort of emotional needs being met. For
Mm,
us, it was, you know, either stiff upper lip and get on with it, you know, because nobody was going to do that for you. The only one who came anywhere near that was Auntie Ray when she was on duty, and she was a 72-hour lady, so she cycled her rota was cycled, so you didn't have a constant, but you knew she was there.
mm,
Um, for me, I would always be able to constantly work hard at supporting those other children, and that gave me a purpose. And I think that was the main real reason why I became very, you know, steely, very. I would always, the principle would always be the most important thing to me. There's always the principle, you know, and sticking by your values and your beliefs. It's something that I've always done. I mean, if you cut me through, you'll see through and through. That's just who I am. Um, it My early years haven't defined my ending, and my career as an athlete, the as lovely as it was to become world champion and world record holder and 4 Olympics and da da da, um, it wasn't about that for me. As nice as it is, I'm grateful for that. It My biggest success and learning was from the experience of self growth,
mm,
and that transformed me way beyond the years of my primary care years. And I think that is why I, Fatima Whitbread, want to run a charity, Fatima's UK campaign, to help improve the lives of children and young people in the care system, because it hasn't changed that much considering the 60 years since I was in care. I've seen governments come and go, kicking that same tin can down the road. But also, I will say this, that there are some really great people that work within the care system tirelessly. They're to be honoured, but sadly, because they work in their silos, it doesn't serve the purpose it should. And in
mm,
fact, it further damages our young people and sets them up for failure. It's not a lack of ambition, it's just that these young people have not been given the tools to deal with. So when they're pushed out at 18, which is far too young in my view, they're not capable of standing on their own feet. They
mm,
haven't got the bank of mum and dad. You know, they're abandoned,
yeah.
and that is unacceptable, because I think the corporate parent, which is the government, has a duty of care to protect them. And, you know, I've worked hard through the campaign to, and my vice chair, Gina Gardner, as you know, Doug, we're
Yep.
Gina has 20 years of head teacher in Romford, and that wealth of knowledge and working with children as well. And my lived experience and my Olympic platform is a force to be reckoned with. And we're doing well, and we've got a petition out there. If you go on fatimascampaign.com, you'll be able to sign this petition, and it's to up the age for children from 18 to 25, because that's far too young to push them out independent living. They only have £2,000 given to them, one point of contact twice, and it's "Tara, have a nice life."
Gee.
Who does that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
The other thing we want to do is bring in a national register for foster care, because often people with great intentions want to foster. We need to look at that area, because only too often they come back saying, well, we tried to foster, but there was this tape, that tape. And yeah, we want to make it a little bit easier. We want to be able to get the right matches for these children as well. We don't want them falling into the wrong hands, having to be moved up to 30 or 40 times in their life. It's damaging for their education, for their relationships. And why would you take them away from siblings and put one at one end of the country and one at the other? It's just not acceptable. There are a lot of things that we're trying to address at this moment in time. But fundamentally, the biggest one is to make sure that we have uh, our action hubs, local authority wraparound programs and pathfinders in place by the time December, January comes, because they should roll out across the country as the months unfold. And no child should ever feel that they go through the system and leave the system unprotected, like abandoned, voiceless, and alone, because that's not acceptable.
I agree. And one of the things you're obviously doing in terms of action for this is bringing together people on the 30th of October for the Friends of Fatima's dinner in terms of the campaign. Do you want to just
Yes.
tell us in terms of that dinner, just tell us a little bit about what will be going on so that if people want to sign up, they can, and also give us obviously the website address as well.
Yes, I mean, it's Friends of Fatima's campaign. There's a dinner on October the 30th, which is at the House of Commons. You can go on fatimascampaign.com. That's Fatima's with an S, campaign.com. And you will see there, you can fill out the booking form and to secure your tickets, or individual tickets, or a table, indeed, if you're a corporate company and you feel that you want to come and support us, help us sustain the work that we're doing, help these young people work in programs to support arts and technology, and also help put together the hubs, maybe with expertise that you have that you might want to impart, and support us to make sure that every child has that same opportunity of living that independent, holistic life and being able to sustain it as well without falling into crisis. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
And I think it's so valuable for people to help. I mean, as a divorced guy, I can see the impact it has had on my children, and I've had a lot of people come to me from divorced families with suicidal tendencies, depression, anxiety, and stress.
sure.
And can you imagine, for those listening, the one step further taking it in terms of what Fatima's been through and those other many children who've had nothing at all? So, yeah, sorry, Fatima, go on.
I would just like to share this. My foster mum, Margaret Whitbread, it was an amazing uh, coincidence of how we met. I mean, I was talking about the netball match that we had. This particular netball match was the last in the league, and it was our school and St Chad's school at the time, and it was a very tight match. It was going 11-11, 12-11, 12 all, and I was raising my voice, and the whistle went, and the umpire said, "Young lady, any more of that cheek and noise, you'll be off." So I kind of looked, and I thought, "Who's that?" And as kids do, because you're quite feisty when you have to stand up for your own rights as a child in the care system. And the match was going 12 all, 13 all. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, today you'd call us motivators, but back then we were called a pain in the ass. And the whistle went, and the umpire said, "I've told you once, young lady, if I have to tell you again, you're off." Well, her team captains, as I turned and muttered under my voice, she said, "Fat," she said, "she's quite strict, be careful." Anyway, we won. Yeah, Auntie Ray got a medal. And it was the end of the netball season, the beginning of the athletic season. And I remember saying to my friend Alma, who lived in the children's home around the corner, Alma, I said, "Why don't we go to the local athletic club?" I said, "The athletics is starting. We both like doing sport." So we kind of walked to the athletic stadium. of which I almost saw when we got to the stadium gates. She saw the sprinters and off she went. And I saw this tall, blonde, good looking fella throwing what looked like a spear. And then I thought, oh, he's nice. I'll go over there. And of course, when I approached the runway, there was a javelin on the ground. So I went to pick up the javelin and he kind of turned to me and said, "You're not allowed to do that." So I said, "Why not?" So he then turned to the shot put coach, Jack Grinney, who then said to me, "Ah, young lady," he said, "you're not allowed to throw any javelins until the javelin coach is here." He said, "So you'll have to come over with me over to the stand and wait." So as I sat waiting in the stand, sort of toe tapping with my arms folded, Jack said, "Oh, here comes the coach." And this Mini pulled up into the car park. And as this person walked across the infield, I thought, it's that same woman on the netball court. What are the chances? And it was the same woman. So when she got to the stand, Jack said, "Ah, Mrs. Whitbread," he said, "I'd like to introduce you to," and before he could even mention my name, Mrs. Whitbread said, "Yes, I know who you are." She said, "You're Fatima." She said, "Well, let me tell you, young lady, any of that cheek you showed here on the netball court, then there'd be no throwing any javelins here." So I kind of cut my hands in prayer and said, "I promise I'll behave." Well, Doug, it took a couple of weeks and she started saying, "You've got a bit of talent. Why don't you ask mum and dad to come up and we can talk about getting you a javelin and putting you into competition program?" So I sort of just nodded my head. And then she started asking Jack, "Has Fatima got a hearing problem?" Every time I ask her about mum and dad. "Oh," he said, "don't you know? She's one of the kids from the children's home." So with that, Mrs. Whitbread the following week brought up a spare pair of boots and a javelin. She said, "Look," she said, "I've had a young girl that's retired." She said, "These boots are probably too big for you." She said, "But stuff them with paper and here's a javelin." And I thought, wow, nobody ever gives the kids anything from the homes. And I wanted to get back to the children's home because in the summer we had German students that used to come and look after us. And the kids that were half stay, they would go home for their parents. Those of us that were there without anyone to go home to, we were looked after by the students. And I said to Ingrid, "Come in the garden, let me show you how I throw this javelin when I'm up at the track." And of course, it took me a couple of throws down the end of the garden into the vegetable patch. And as I pulled my javelin out of the vegetable patch, I sort of discarded the potato off the end of it. And I walked forward and I said, "Ingrid, move out the way. I'm going to give it a really big throw this time." And of course I did. And it went smash through the French windows. And Ingrid's standing there with her head in her hands. "Oh, you'll be in trouble." And I said, "Oh, what's new? I'm always in trouble because I was always calling out any injustice, you see." So I got a month's ban, Dougie. And what that meant was that I couldn't do any sport after school. And equally, I couldn't visit Auntie Ray when she was off duty because I used to stop in and see her on the way home and have a cup of tea and a biscuit and a chat. And as the couple of weeks went by, there's only so much tinkering with bike punctures and so on in the garden. I was starting to get a bit bored. And then I got a message from one of the girls at the opposite team. "Ah, Mrs. Whitbread thinks you've bunked off, took the javelin and the boots and sold them and you're not interested anymore." And I thought, "Oh, I can't have that." So I got up 2 o'clock one early hours of the morning, went downstairs to the front room where the French bureau was, and I pulled out, in my ignorance, an airmail envelope, and I started writing, "Dear Mrs. Whitbread, sorry I can't come to the track, only I smashed a French window and I've got a ban. But one day I'd like to be the best javelin thrower in the world." And I sort of stuck it down and I put Mrs. Whitbread St. Chad's School. And the next morning on the way to school, I sort of hid it under my arm and posted it through the box. And within a few days, the phone was ringing. I thought she couldn't have got it because nobody was sort of making any noises. And then the phone rang and I sort of pressed my ear to the glass window and I heard Auntie say, "No, no, she can't come. She's been really naughty. She smashed the French windows, blah, blah, blah." Well, Mrs. Whitbread must have been quite, you know, persuasive because she within a week got me back throwing at the track, and that was amazing. And then of course she invited me to tea to meet the family, and with that. She said, look, it's summer holidays. How about you come and stay with us for a couple of weeks? And I kind of looked and I thought, oh, I'm not sure because I'm supposed to be looking after the kids. But Auntie Ray told me, in fact, she said, you've always wanted to know what it's like in family. She said, go on, she said, I'll look after the children. You go and enjoy your 2 weeks. And at the end of that 2 weeks, Greg, because I met the family, 4-year-old Greg and 2-year-old Kirk. Greg said to his mum, do we have to take Fatima back to the shop? It was
Hilarious.
amazing, hilarious. But when I got back to the children's home, obviously on the way back, Mrs. Whitbread said to me, well, she said, we've been thinking, she said, how about, she said, would you like to come and live with us? And I sort of looked at her and I thought, are you for real? And I didn't dare believe it because that's the last thing I wanted to build up my hopes. And then, trust issues, are always a problem with children in the care system, always getting let down through one thing or another. And I didn't want to be open for any more hurt. But when I got back to the children's home, the house auntie said, so you're leaving us, are you? What are you going to tell Auntie Ray then? And I knew Auntie Ray was coming in on duty that afternoon. I could hear her clip clopping up the back door. And I thought, oh, what am I going to tell Auntie Ray? So no sooner the door opened and Auntie Ray came in, the house auntie said, well, go on then, tell her. And I the first time I've ever felt like my loyalty was split with Auntie Ray and obviously to Mrs. Whitbread. Auntie Ray was the mum that I always wanted, and Mrs. Whitbread was providing me with love and security of a family. And Auntie Ray looked at me and she said, true to Auntie Ray, she said, Fat, she said, are you going to become a Whitbread? And she threw her arms around me. She said, I couldn't be happier for you. She said, that's all I can't give you. She said, and you should go. And
Oh,
that what gave me permission to let go of the care system. But
oh,
as you know, I haven't let go because I've come back in a full circle. And my ministry today is through Fatima's UK campaign to improve the life outcomes for children and young people in the care system.
wow, 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 wow. What a story. I've got tears in my eyes, Fatima. Well, that's such a beautiful story. And if anybody's listened to this, please, please, please look up Fatima's campaign, help out, come along. This woman is an absolute superstar. She was a superstar in the 80s and 90s. I saw her many, many times on TV, an absolute legend. And now look at what she's doing. It's been an absolute pleasure. Fatima, we've run out of time. Fatima, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and I wish you so much success going forward.
Yeah, thank you, Doug.
My name's Doug Gordon, and you've been listening to Fatima Whitbread on Inspirational People, Inspirational Stories. I'll be back next week with another inspirational guest. In the meantime, if you need to get in touch, please contact me at doug@dougdgordon.com. From all of us here on the team of the show, I wish you a truly inspirational week and look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.